Hey, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to talk about why it is important to limit screen time for both you and your children. Last time we talked about being screen-free, I mentioned how we actually got to that point. Now, if you haven't watched that video yet, I will link it up below. But it is just basically how we got from being kind of addicted to TV. We basically watch TV almost every night to now hardly ever watching TV. And when we do, it is super intentional and we decide, okay, this is going to be movie night, or this is going to be a night where we watch a fun show with the children. So we went from one side of the angle to the complete opposite, and that is super fun. But anyways, I wanted to share a little bit more about why it is important to reduce screen time. So let's dive into all the details. Before we start, I do want to mention that first off, I have nothing against screens in general. We use screens, but we just use them very intentionally. And that is what I'm talking about when I say limit your screen time, but also becoming screen-free. Now, the first one is kind of obvious, and that has everything to do with physical health. When you sit in front of a screen, you are not moving, so it doesn't do any good for your body in that sense. But usually, if you're like me, you're probably eating. And honestly, that is not good for your body either. Now, I know that when my children watch the show, they always ask me for a snack. They always want to eat something. And I think that is probably because you're just sitting down and you want to do something. I don't know. But when I sit down and watch a movie, I always want to eat something with it. So if you do that, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours a day, it's obviously not going to be very beneficial. So that is two very obvious reasons. You're not moving and you're probably eating. But another thing that I actually experienced firsthand is how bad it is for your posture. I have been working from home for the last 4 years. And a lot of my time was spent just on my phone, on a laptop, on a screen, honestly, because I do a lot of things online. And what I do is I sit down like this. So I look down at my phone and my shoulders go forward. I've been doing this so much that my posture is actually really bad. And right now, I'm sitting in my comfortable posture. And my shoulders are actually hanging forward. You can't really see it on the video, but my shoulders are forward. When I put them like I should be, it hurts my shoulders so much. Like my muscles have been so used to moving forward that putting my shoulders back, and this actually feels like I am like all the way like this. It feels like that to me because my shoulders get so tight. So I actually have so much trouble with sitting straight because I've been hanging forward, honestly, for so much of my last 4 years. And that is something I really don't want my children to experience. So that is one of the reasons why you want to reduce that. You don't want your children to get so accustomed to just looking at a phone constantly that their shoulders will move forward, that they will have all sorts of physical problems just because they're using a phone or using a screen instead of going outside and just enjoying nature, going out, exploring, climbing, riding their bikes, whatever it is way better for their physical body than watching a screen. So anyways, let's move to number 2. So the next reason why you want to reduce your child's screen time is to help them with their mental health. Because honestly, what is on TV is 9 out of 10 times it's just junk. They're fighting, they're screaming, they're killing each other even. Why would I want my child that is 4 years old watch somebody fighting with another man and bleeding all over or whatever? I do not want that. I don't want my child to watch things like that. So what I want is to help my child process things that they're learning. I want them to process their emotions. I want to stimulate their creativity. Do I do that with a screen? No, I do not. Because when I put them in front of a screen, they get, like I said, they get so much information that they don't really get the time to process what they've been learning in school. They just get more and more and more and more. and it doesn't help them to process anything. While when they color or when they're playing outside, they are moving, their mind gets like a bit of rest, and it helps them to process what they've been doing. So when they're outside, what I often hear is my son explaining something to my younger daughter. So he is 7, my younger daughter is 4, and he explains something that he learned in school to my daughter just because he wants to process what he's been learning. When we talked about a blue whale, he will color a blue whale, or we will color an ocean. And it helps him process what he's been learning. And that's so much better than getting more information and just being overstimulated. We just need rest. We need to color, we need to paint, we need to go outside, we need to be in nature, we need to do fun things just to help us process our thoughts. Now, next up is their social skills, because obviously they're not going to be very social when they're watching a screen all the time. When they're constantly on their phone doing games, or when they're watching TV or whatever they're doing, they do not develop their social skills. And it's really important that we teach our children, how do you act in group situations? How are you with other children? How will you respond to older people? How will you respond to your neighbor? How do you say hi to people that you see on the street? Things like that are actually super important. And a lot of children don't really learn that anymore. And in order to teach them that, they need to be in social environments. So they need to go into the playground when they come home from school, for example. They need to learn how to play with other children, and they need to learn how to respond to someone that's older than them in order to develop those skills. So instead of putting them in front of the TV and put on a show that talks about social skills, let's take our children away from the screen and put them in the situation and teach them on the spot, because that is way more beneficial than watching a show that talks about social skills and actually letting them do it. Now, another reason why you want to reduce your child's screen time is because of their academic performance. Now, we talked about how my son processes a lot of things that he learns at school through coloring or through playing outside or doing things in social groups or just with his sister. But another thing that I actually learned from experience is that when you have children performing badly at school, it is often because of things that they're doing at home. I used to be a teacher, and I had a lot of children that didn't really do well in my class. Not because I was a bad teacher, but because of those children oftentimes had a gaming background. So they were gaming basically all day, every day. And so they didn't do their homework. They didn't learn anything in class. They were super tired because it is very bad for their sleep as well, but we'll talk about that later. It is way easier to reduce their screen time when they're 5 or 6 or 7 and teach them how to color, how to read a book, how to be enlightened by other things instead of only gaming and watching TVs. It is really bad for their academic performance. And I really want to encourage you, if you have younger children, start reducing that screen time now that it's easier to adapt for your child than when they have been watching screens nonstop for 10 years already. Then it's going to be way, way harder for them to quit because they've been addicted basically for 10 years, and that is going to be super hard. So think about it now to remove any drama or any hardships later in life. Now, the last one I want to talk about is sleep deprivation. I mentioned it briefly in my previous point, but a lot of times those that are addicted to gaming or are addicted to TV or screens in general have a really hard time sleeping. And that is obvious. They are just in front of the TV, they forget about the time, they do one more game, and before you know it, they go to bed at 2 or 3 or 4 a.m. and they wake up at 6 and they're supposed to be doing great in school. That is not going to happen because they need a lot more sleep than that. But another thing that a lot of people usually overlook is the thing that I mentioned before. Basically, they get so much stimulation into their brains that a child basically needs more sleep to get rid of all, or to process all that information that they got during the day, because that is what our mind does at night. It processes everything that we learned throughout the day. And when our child gets so much information because they go to school, then they watch a show or two, when they're home, then they eat, and then they do, I don't know, an hour of gaming. They get so much information during that day that their mind never gets a break. So their mind is constantly going in overdrive. To make sure that you can process that information, you need the right amount of sleep. And if your child gets so much information, they actually need more sleep to make sure that you can process it. So what happens? Our children are still sleeping the same amount as every other child. So slowly they will get sleep deprived because they just don't get enough sleep to get rid of all that information. They get overstimulated in their heads. And a lot of times our children will become very active and busy because they're not sure what is in their head. They don't know how to process it. So they kind of show it through their emotions. They get angry quickly, they are overactive, things like that I hear a lot in my direct family, is that a lot of children are just so overstimulated, but a lot of times the parents don't even realize that they are the ones that can actually reduce that by making sure they don't sit in front of a screen that often. I gave you 5 reasons to why I think it is very important to reduce screen time, because I really don't want your child in 5 or 10 years to be overstimulated, burned out, not knowing what to do with their life, hardly ever sleeping, and just being addicted to screens. That is not what I want your child's future to be like, and I think you don't want your child's future to be like that either, because you wouldn't have clicked on this video if you would. So I really want to encourage you to think about it and to start to reduce screen time. Now, the why is what we mentioned today, but the how is a very different story. And we're going to talk about that in a different video, because this video is probably going to be way too long already. So we're going to talk about the how in a different video, but really start by doing just 10 minutes less than they do now. Start by reducing it a little bit, or set a timer and see how long are they actually on an average day, how long are they in front of the TV, and go from there. Reduce 5 or 10 minutes and go from there. That is a great way to start, but we'll talk about the how in our next video. I hope you found a lot of information in this video and that you loved this video. And if you did, feel free to like this video and to subscribe to my channel. Start small already, reduce 5 or 10 minutes from the time they have now, and I will see you in my next video when we talk about the how.